Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man, and you're listening to The Scoop on owlscoop.com. You already know.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Scoop, owlscoop.com's podcast. This is season 7, episode 8. And guess who is back with us this week? The one and only Kyle Gauss. You look like you were kind of like disappointed with that intro.
Well, I was curious. I was like, I was wondering if it was a rhetorical question or if you actually wanted, like, well, guess who's back? And me to be like, I don't know. The McRib, like, what am I supposed to guess is back?
McRib. Should eat a McRib during this podcast and see if we can get through
Never had
the
McRib.
I don't think I have either. I don't think I want one.
No, I mean, I like ribs, I guess, but like I haven't had McDonald's in a while. Actually, McDonald's, last time I had McDonald's, you're going to hate me for this because, of course, last time I had McDonald's was in Italy. It was in Rome.
Really? I think
yeah, because this was like 2017, and this was, you could like go up and order it via like a touch screen, and you could order wine. And I was like, well, I can't not order wine at like a McDonald's in Rome. So like I just came back like boop, boop, boop. And they brought out this little like cup of wine.
How was it? Was it good?
It was fine. McDonald's is fine. You get a break in your stomach afterwards. The whole point of McDonald's, not to get too off, the whole point of McDonald's is consistency, right? I can go to any town in America and get a double or get a quarter pounder cheese and it's supposed to taste exactly the same. It's supposed to be familiar. You're reminded, you get nostalgia, familiarity. It tastes the same in Europe.
Why did
I think they had like
you guys just like, was it hot and you just needed food? You needed what? Why walk?
It was just near, I mean, I had to look, I think we stayed near like Plaza Navarro, which was like near the Vatican, like across the bridge from the Vatican. Yeah. And there was a McDonald's right near our place. And I just happened to pop on in there. Either that or the only other recent McDonald's memory I have in my mind is I was connecting a flight from Madison to Philly before they had a direct flight to Madison. Thank God. Great invention, American Airlines. And I was in O'Hare and I had like 35 minutes to get to my next flight. And I was just eating over like a Big Mac over like a trash can. Just like disgusting, but like just do this.
Oh, interesting. Dante Collinelli is going to be with us a little bit later in the show. Sam, allegedly. Dante will be with us a little bit later. Sam not on the show this week. He'll be back with us next week, hopefully.
As my drafts. Somebody signed up for a year membership, so I fired him.
Yeah, that was great. You
have no idea what
sharing your drafts. I sent you what my drafts looked like. I was going to tweet out something about spitting out ice cream, which I believe was a reference to Gabe Kapler. Didn't Gabe Kapler do the thing where didn't he do some interview where he said like he would he would put ice cream in his mouth to get the taste of it, but then spit it out?
Yeah, I do recall that because he didn't want to waste the calories.
Yeah, weird dude. I mean, hey, tip my cap to him. He's got the Giants playing good baseball.
Well, it helps when you have 5 starting pitchers and you're right in like the 2s. But yeah,
sure. Yeah, you know who's not playing good baseball? The Phillies. But this isn't a Phillies podcast. You're happy about that as a Braves fan.
It's expected at this point.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, if you got your hopes up about the Phillies, that's your fault. Anyway, let's get back to Temple football. Famous number 8s. You got any before we move along and get into recapping Wagner and previewing Memphis?
Aaron McKee.
Perfect one.
Davey O'Brien.
Yep.
Javi Lopez.
Yep.
That's about it.
And
Kobe, right? Kobe Bryant.
Of course, Kobe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Temple got back on track, which it had no choice to do last week, being Wagner 41-7. We'll talk a little bit about Memphis in a second. Temple's homecoming game. That I think they have a real opportunity to kind of just, not saying they're going to beat Memphis and then win the league, but they have the opportunity to kind of change the conversation about their season this coming Saturday against a Memphis team that I think is beatable. We'll get into that in a little bit. Again, they, save for them falling behind to Wagner, which was not a good look. Temple reels off 41 straight points. Kyle, what stood out to you about this game? I mean, was this about what you expected? Again, obviously, if they lose this game or if it was even close, we'd be having a much different conversation right now. It would have been bad to say the least, but Dewan Wagner did not play quarterback.
God, that'd be so good.
Temple, that would have been a definite sidebar coming out of last Saturday's game. What a story. Twan Mathis played. Kyle Dobbins established himself. Again, we take a little bit of this with a grain of salt, but look, Mathis had to play, needed some snaps under his belt, went 22 of 32 passing for 292 yards, 2 touchdowns. Kyle Dobbins had 13 carries, 61 yards, 3 touchdowns. But again, you're looking for some sort of bell cow back. It's a step in the right direction. Jaden Blue, Randall Jones are out. So Jose Barbon steps up. Cadis Ream steps up. What'd you take from this game?
I've actually been thinking about this a fair amount, to be honest. Like, how much can you gauge off of this? How much can you actually learn from this? I think it's a lot easier to correct mistakes and fix things after a win rather than following a loss. So, I mean, I think it's something that necessarily shouldn't be taken for granted at this point, because, hey, look, they've won 3 games in the last 2 years, right? Like, it's been 2 calendar years and they've won 3 games. So I think anytime you can get a win, it's a good thing. It's easy to kind of look at your roster, like, hey, we did these 2 things wrong. Like, the one thing, Quantel Reigns misses an open field tackle, and that's Wagner's entire offense for the entire game. So you can literally go down to, if Quantel Reigns makes that tackle there, which I think he would tell you should do, and Rod Carey said, yeah, he obviously should have made that tackle. If that happens, then Wagner probably gets shut out. We're looking at a 41-0 win, and people are probably fine with it. I don't think you can really take much from it offensively, even though they did put up 41 points, because I don't think they ran anything close to their offense. Like, a lot of that is probably because of the fact that Dwan Mathis is playing on a bum leg at this point. But did you see a single RPO in there? No. Like, every single play was just, hey, we have better athletes here. Let's get them in space. Let's do that. To their credit, they did it well. Jose Barbon had a great game. When they finally did decide to take some shots, it's, hey, we have Cadis Ream, who ran a 4.38 or whatever at a Rutgers camp to get a Temple offer. Let's just run him on a go route. And he runs on a go route. So I think I completely agree with the decision to keep Matheson as long as you did, to be honest, as long as they did, to be honest. I know a lot of people on Twitter were saying, like, get him out there. He's injured. We get him out of there. Like, just save him for Memphis. But he needed the reps. Like, he had played a quarter and a half at Temple in 4 weeks. So, I mean, I was completely okay with them staying in that far. Defense, I don't think anybody played more than like 25, 30 snaps. They were just rotating a lot of guys in, getting people's feet wet. It was nice. People will say, why is Wagner on the schedule, which I get, but it's also kind of enjoyable as just somebody that covers the team to be like, oh, well, that's what Malik Cooper looks like in a roster, in a Temple jersey. And that's where they're going to try to use him. You kind of get to like an opportunity to kind of see how they project people to the next level. So all in all, it's not a game that I think they should think much about one way or the other. I'm sure they feel glad just to get the win, but on to a much, much more important game.
Yeah. Again, good sign that, again, with Blue and Jones out, that you start to see a little bit of something from, well, a lot more of something from Jose Barbon.
And Ahmad Anderson. Like, Ahmad Anderson had a pretty solid game, other than the punt return fumble. But like, within the offense, like he showed shiftiness in the open field. Yeah.
Mentioned Kyle Dobbins earlier. Again, it's coming against a bad FCS team, but this is a Memphis team, and we'll get to them in a second, that showed they were 2 different teams from 1 week to the next. Like, they had held Mississippi State to just 50 yards the week before. And then last week they blow a 21-0 lead to University of Texas, San Antonio, which is actually a pretty good program this year.
Which I think we're going to talk about in a mailbag question later on.
Yes.
And as a potential conference petition.
Yes. And Sincere McCormick, they're back, who was actually a pretty good player coming out of high school, gashed them for 180 yards and 3 touchdowns.
I love that name. I
know, Sincere McCormick.
It's like when you're like, oh man, I gotta go get the seasoning for my dry rub, and it's like, oh man, Sincere McCormick
yes,
spices.
McCormick. Great lineage of herbs and spices. So, again, it's they play who's on their schedule. They needed a win. So again, you see 61 yards and 3 touchdowns out of Kyle Dobbins. He looked like he ran decisively. Here's Rod Carey talking about Kyle Dobbins' performance. Again, Kyle Dobbins, if Temple fans are familiar with him, he was a fairly highly touted recruit coming out of South Jersey. He started St. Augustine Prep, finished up at Timber Creek, was a good recruit, really hasn't been able to get things together until recently. Trey Blair's went out. Ed Sadie's still in the lineup. Rayvon Bonner's been banged up. He could play again this week, the Illinois transfer. But here was an opportunity for someone to step forward. Kyle Dobbins did. Here's Rod Carey talking about what he liked from Kyle Dobbins' performance.
Kyle has worked, he was one of those guys that pushed through the entire fall camp, didn't miss, was available, and certainly last week had a good week of practice and has kept pushing. And so that got him in a situation where he earned what he got on Saturday. And it's amazing when an amazing trick in football, I say that completely facetiously, is that when you practice good, you play good. It's an amazing thing that I think sometimes we like to look at highlight reels as a society and think that just happens. It doesn't. And so it's proud of Kyle.
Right. So it sounds again like, you hear Rod saying there, look, he's put in the work. He's practiced well, not too much mystery to it. And, again, it would be a great story for Temple if Kyle Dobbins keeps this going. And again, this is a Memphis team, like I said a few minutes ago, went from one end of the spectrum to the other in terms of, stopping the run. And here's an offense that you really want to keep off the field. They run tempo. They can wear down your defense. And if you can, obviously you can do some things with DeJuan Mathis. He has to prove it against a better team. But if they can sustain some longer drives and Kyle Dobbins can give them something with Memphis coming off a week where they didn't stop the run, I don't know. Again, maybe this is coming at the right time. Do you think this is something that Dobbins can take into this Saturday?
Yeah, I think he needs to. This isn't the first time that we've heard Kyle Dobbins' name, right? Fast forward or rewind back to 2019, the preseason prior to Ramon Davis kind of taking over, and that you were hearing Kyle Dobbins' name there. Mm-hmm. Like I remember going to a camp practice at Giese, and he looked good, and he was getting time with the ones as probably a redshirt freshman at that point, and then didn't really play. I like the quote where he says, "Like, look, I saw how this was going. Like I saw that I wasn't playing, and I kind of saw how like this was going to go if something didn't change." It's like when you're like texting like your high school girlfriend, and she starts to get like further and further apart with the responses. Like, oh, I see where this is going, right? Like we might not get there tomorrow, we might not get there in 2 days, but eventually, like I see that we're going to break up. So like I kudos to Kyle Dobbins for being like, okay, this is my opportunity to blood in the water to seize a role, and I think he carved that role. I think they'll still start with Ed Sadie or Trey Blair to start the game against Memphis, but Kyle Dobbins showed an ability to be maybe that red zone back or kind of get those opportunities. So yeah, all in all, he has opportunities this week. I think if you need to sustain momentum, you're only as good as your last performance. If he goes out after Rutgers, we were talking about how good Ed Sadie looked, and he hasn't looked that way since. It'd be quite blunt. So I'm always kind of okay with the running back by committee if you're getting the results. But somebody is going to need to step up against this Memphis team.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, defensively, they could be vulnerable. They've got this weird stat where they have, Dante's pointed this out. It'll be in his preview, something we were talking about just on our group chat, where they have 30 pass breakups through 4 games, which is kind of insane. Shows you that they've played teams that have thrown the ball, but they're last in the league with just 1 interception. Offensively, they scare you. Obviously, this is a good quarterback that they're facing. Seth Hennigan, it really hasn't looked like a freshman.
Yeah, sure, but like he's also just doing what they're asking him to do. Right?
Sure, but still doing it well.
Yeah, no, obviously, like when you're number 9 in the nation in passing yards, if you're doing something right? But like he hasn't really been tested. He hasn't looked good the last 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. He didn't look good against Mississippi State at all, and he looked okay against UTSA. His numbers are probably a little better than he actually was. Mm-hmm. Part of it's, look, you got Calvin Austin, right? So 529 receiving yards. He's leading the conference. I think he's number 2 in the NCAA and receiving touchdowns with 7. But Hennigan's average depth of throw is on 8.9 yards because they don't need him to throw it deep. They have these dynamic athletes. Calvin Austin has 290 yards after the catch this year. So like, yes, he's doing well, and yes, he doesn't look like a freshman, but like, I don't know if I'd crown him quite yet.
Sure,
is what I'd say. I don't think they haven't really faced anything yet, and he hasn't. I know they went on the road against Arkansas State, but that's basically another home game. This is going to be the first time that they really went on the road, go into an environment that should hopefully be relatively hostile because it's homecoming, and it's a trip that they haven't done well with. like 2 years ago, they lost to Temple here. So I'll be curious to
Mhm.
see what a true freshman, an 18-year-old looks like in an actual road game.
And this is a test for, it's a test for Hannigan. It's a test for, before we get to, Temple being a test for this, the Temple secondary. It's, a couple things I wanted to get to here. Yeah, I think this is a beatable Memphis team. Now, they faced a good receiver in Bo Melton, but with the exception of that, where Keyshawn Paul whiffs in the opener, they haven't been like truly like really victimized by. So they've faced some good receivers. Now Zay
Sure.
Flowers, save for that, I can't remember if it was just like a reverse push pass type of thing. They kind of held him in check. Granted, they lost 28-3, but this and Calvin Austin, really good receiver they're facing. He's a shorter guy, but he's quick. They're gonna have to be mindful of him. He's returned a 94-yard punt return touchdown this year, so they got to be mindful of him.
See that play?
No, I did not.
So that's the other thing. We don't want to get too far into this. I think the other one was he returns. Was that the one that was that the punt return or the fumble return? The only reason they beat Mississippi State is because he had a heads up play where Mississippi State didn't understand how to down a punt, and he picks it up and runs it back 96 yards.
Yeah, not that one, but I think he's got a 94
He's
yard.
got an actual punt return as well.
I think so. Yeah.
I didn't do my research.
So, I mean, this is a big test for Temple in terms of, again, it's not like Temple is not a new thing in college football. Memphis has done it. But is this secondary? And again, I'm not trying to also crown Temple secondary 4 games in, they faced, Rutgers and Boston College, and then they faced Akron and Wagner. But in terms of looking at the secondary, and they've had, Deshaun Winston's been out. MJ Griffin has played better. Amir Tyler, I guess, has been okay. But have Cam Ruiz and Keyshawn Paul, again, we just talked about Keyshawn Paul missing on a tackle in the Rutgers game, but they had a multitude of problems in that game. But has this pass defense been better than you expected it to be through the first 4 games? Again, I'm not trying to say that they're, up there with an SEC team. It's 4 games in, but have they been better than you expected?
Real quick, I was right about Calvin Austin. His punt return was Mississippi State didn't understand how to down a ball, so he went and just picked it up. So it wasn't a traditional punt return. He tried fair catching it. They screw it up and he takes it from there. But anyway, to answer your question, yeah, sure. I mean, they haven't really played anybody. I got some guff from some dude on Twitter this week by saying they were number 2 in the nation in passing defense. He's like, well, they haven't played anybody. It's a result of the teams they played. Well, yeah, that's what stats are. Stats are directly impacted by the teams you're playing. But yeah, I mean, I think we had questions coming in about where or not Cam Ruiz would just end up kind of being a glorified slot guy, or if he could really play out wide. He's played out wide the entire season. The only game that he played in the slot at all was a little bit against Akron, but for the most part, he's just lining up out wide. I think Keyshawn Paul has been exactly as advertised, except for that one missed tackle. I think the thing that's going to be interesting and kind of sets the ceiling for what this pass defense can be is that other safety spot. I mean, Amir Tyler is a captain for a reason. He's a good player. He's he's better in the box and against the run, in my opinion, than necessarily his coverage. So you hope that Deshaun Winston is able to come back from a lower body injury and kind of provide that, because right now, I mean, they're throwing out there. I'm sorry, I said Deshaun Winston, right? Yeah, they're rolling out a combination of Alex Odom, MJ Griffin, and Jalen Ware is still coming out there. But I mean, they're better when Deshaun Winston has the ability to kind of go in there. MJ Griffin played very well in times this year, and he's also kind of been a third starting safety. But I think in order for them to really take the next step as a pass defense, I think Deshaun Winston needs to be healthy and be out there.
So for looking at that receiving core, looking at the tempo that they play with, I mean, do you think I don't want to simplify it this much, but do you think that is the key to this game, establishing Dobbins, establishing the run, making sure that you're not putting, I mean, you want to get DeJuan Mathis involved. You saw like the one play that he made where he was able to kind of make some stuff happen in the pocket. I think it was the touchdown pass to Reams, right, where he escaped a little bit of pressure. But I'm not saying you don't throw the ball, but do you think the key to beating Memphis is just really establishing the run, keeping that offense off the field, keeping your defense rested, and sustaining some longer drives to get a win here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you ever really want to get into a shootout, right? Especially if you're Temple. I mean, historically, even when they've gotten into these shootouts, they're usually on the wrong end of them. Like you go back to like the only game that I can really remember that they really got into a true shootout and won was that 2015 game against SMU. where they won 60-40.
Yeah.
But for the most part, I mean, the way that Temple upsets teams and wins games is by controlling the clock and taking their opportunities when they have it. If you're asking me what the key to this game is, I honestly look at the other side. I think that Memphis has a pretty big mismatch in Sean Dykes, the tight end that lines out wide a lot.
Right.
I think they really have to contain him. I mean, Calvin Austin's going to get what he gets. I think Dykes is kind of the X factor there. But I don't think Temple, to go back to your point, I don't think Temple should be abandoning the pass whatsoever or anything like that. I mean, it's still a Memphis team that gave up 600 passing yards to Arkansas State. Like, you can throw on these teams too. This just seems like a pretty typical Memphis team. So,
well, as promised, we said that Dante Collinelli was going to be joining us on the pod today. We didn't want to let anybody down, so Dante's with us. Dante, how you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here. Had a crazy day. Kyle said that I've been welcome to the real world, attending meetings all day. I feel like a real adult now.
So yeah, your crazy day was you were in meetings. I was like, yeah, man, that happens.
Well, I mean, I went to class too. They like sent us into Center City to like, it's a lot.
Dante's a senior. He's also the digital chief digital copy editor at the Temple News, right?
That's right. Yeah.
I should know that as your advisor. A little plug for the Temple News. I will say that the paper's celebrating its 100th anniversary this year. If you're a Temple grad,
the hell interviewed these people and didn't interview me?
I knew you were going to make this about
who didn't interview me? We got to interview Kevin Nagandi and Kristen Graham, but you can't interview Kyle Gauss. I'm right here. We could have done it via text.
We all have that in common too. I am a product of the Temple News. Kyle Gauss is a product of the Temple News. Kyle Gauss doesn't work at the Temple News. Kyle Gauss wouldn't be sitting here right now. I never would have known him. So I feel fortunate that he worked at the Temple News.
I would have weaseled my way in somewhere. It would have been fine.
And Dante works at the Temple News. They put out the paper's 100th anniversary issue this week in print. We'll have a lot of great digital content throughout the year. Actually, they're going to have a table set up in Lot K in Saturday's game along Tailgate Row. So if you are listening to this podcast and you worked at the Temple News, if you're a fan of the Temple News and read it, stop by. We'll have a table there prior to the game.
What you guys should do for the anniversary, whatever, is be like a very meta joke and be like, oh, we did the foodies and we found this little hole in the wall called Bob and Barbara's, and do it for the 17th straight time. Somebody will review Bob and Barbara's.
So yes, Dante has been busy all day with meetings, but he's joining us now on the scoop. Dante, we've already reviewed the Wagner win. You just filed the preview for Saturday's game. Kyle and I think this is a winnable game. What do you think?
Winnable, absolutely, right? Like I think that they have an opportunity to win this game. I think the big matchup for Temple is going to be if their secondary plays as well as they've played the entire season against Memphis's passing attack. They've got a freshman quarterback who's very, very good. He's incredibly efficient. He has turned the ball over one time this year. I don't know if he's like an NFL guy, but he's a good college quarterback. And I think that, he might be one of the better college quarterbacks that they've seen so far, which is not a high bar to clear, but that's where we're at. And I think that obviously Calvin Austin's a big test at wide receiver as well for this secondary, right? Like he's kind of the engine that makes the offense go. They're going to do everything in their power to get the ball into his hands. On the flip side, Memphis's passing defense is like not good. They give up a ton of yards. They're towards the bottom of the American. Ironically, they have 30 pass breakups and only one interception, which like, as somebody who studies the NFL draft and like numbers for prospects and stuff, I cannot tell you how outrageous that discrepancy is.
Yeah, it's weird. We were just talking about that earlier, and like I talked about it. I did a interview with the Fanatic this morning with Pat Egan and talked about how you had pointed that out. I mean, is that just a product of them just playing teams through the first 4 games that just throw a ton, and they've just been just not getting their hands on enough of them or bringing them in?
I think so. Going back and watching some of the broadcast games, I mean, like every game that they've played in is a shootout thus far. So teams have, either Memphis has jumped out to a big lead and teams have had to throw a ton to get back into the game, or it's been the other way around where Memphis had to come from behind. So they're a really interesting team. I don't know if they're as good as the 3-1 record says they are. UTSA kind of, just manhandled them a little bit in the running game. They ran Sincere McCormick like 42 times, I think, off the top of my head in that game. So Yeah, I agree with you guys. This is a winnable game for Temple. I think that they can win it. But I also think it's going to be their biggest test of the season as far from the defensive standpoint. If Jerkovich had played versus Boston College, I would have leaned more towards that. But like clearly Grossell just did not have it that week. So I think this is going to be the biggest test quarterback and for in quarterbacks and then for their defense. But this is a winnable game. Temple should be able to score on them is what I'm saying, right? Is like Temple's been playing better competition and they haven't scored a lot of points. They should be able to score on Memphis. This should not be a 28-3 ball game.
Is this?
Sorry, real quick. I was kind of hoping that Dante was going to come in cold and just make the same points I made because that would make me feel better about myself because I respect Dante's football opinion. So I was hoping that he would kind of identify the same things. I agree. I think Hennigan's the best quarterback they've played. Dante, before you were getting on, I was trying to kind of downplay him a little bit just because he's just doing what they asked him to do, right? Like he's just getting the ball into Calvin Austin's hands. I think Sean Dykes is still the mismatch here at tight end. I don't know what Temple's going to do. I don't know if you play Cam Ruiz more in the slot against him. I don't know if you utilize an extra safety like MJ Griffin or Alex Odom against him. I don't know. I think that's the one to watch. But yeah, I completely agree. Very winnable game.
Or is anybody good enough at Bubo to cover him?
Yeah, I mean, so like Quantel Reigns, not the best game of his career. He didn't play that much against Wagner, but he made the only real defensive mistake against Wagner. So yeah, is it a Bubo situation? Is that Quantel Reigns Quantel Reigns is the only like bigger boo-boo they have. I mean, because DJ Woodbury's still growing into his body at that size. He put on a lot of weight from wide receiver. Mahim Makargo's tiny at Bubo. So
Thomas
yeah.
Joe Kamara, we should say, is now has
gone.
entered the transfer portal. Another roster update, of course, Iverson Clement, Rod Carey shared this week, is no longer with the program.
And Real Mitchell.
Yeah, Real Mitchell has left too. So a few departures. Would have been great to see what Iverson Clement could have done. You know, they've said that he was dealing with some personal issues. Rod Carey, he was no longer with the team. Iverson Clement, I think at one point got on social media and say, I didn't leave the team, although Rod Carey never. He got
pissed because somebody posted, like not anybody here, like some random transfer portal thing posted like Iverson Clement has left the team, which was not what Rod Carey said, which is not how we framed it, but somebody framed it that way. He took offense to that.
So a couple of roster updates there.
But to be honest, he hasn't been on the team in a couple months at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's throw around some predictions. I think this is a winnable game. I'll stick with the prediction I made on the Fanatic this morning. I think this is a 31-28 Temple win with Rory Bell hitting a late field goal.
You always do that. Whenever you predict a win, it's always on a late field goal. I swear to God, it's always on a late field goal. I got to stick with the visions that I see. If I don't know, it's what I see. It's what I see. To steal a phrase from Sam Cohen this week, I think I give Rory Bell his flowers a little bit. Like he's been pretty adamant that he has the leg to extend them. Right,
it was great in that press conference.
Yeah, he had a 47-yarder, 46-yarder, 47. So like by far the longest of his career. Mm-hmm. I know people, not to go off on a tangent, people have been talking a lot about how special teams have not improved since Rod Carey got special teams other than punt return. And so that is a lot better this year than it was last year. Like kicking Rory Bell is a lot better on kickoffs this year than he was last year. Mm-hmm. Adam Berry is having like an all conference level year at punting. They just got to figure out returns a bit.
Right.
But,
or do they, like, as Dante said, do they want to return the ball?
That'll be curious. Returns? I mean, that'll be curious this year, this week, assuming Jaden Blue is back and healthy, which it sounds like he's going to be. Is he going back to punt returning, or do you keep Matt Anderson out there and so on and so forth? If it's the former, I think then you just throw catching and go from there, because Jaden Blue, as good as he is as wide receiver, is not a very good punt return from what we've seen. Memphis game. I keep kind of coming back to envisioning 2019 when it was a close game. It comes down to that. Is it a catch? Is it not a catch on fourth down for Memphis? I think Temple wins this game. Not on a late Rory Bell field goal. I think it's similar to 2019 where they're going to get up and they're going to try to stave off Memphis. I'm going to say Temple 38, Memphis 31. Homecoming. Yeah. This is the fork in the road, right? If they win this game, they're 3-2. They have a tough game against Cincinnati 6 games later, but you kind of see a path to bowl eligibility if they win this game. If they lose this game, it's hard for me to envision them somehow scraping out 6 wins. So do you want to go to a bowl? You got to win this game.
Yeah. Dante?
I guess I got to be the contrarian here, I guess. Yeah, I think Memphis is going to win. I got it 35-31 Memphis. I think that I'll be honest, I'll be blunt. I do not have a lot of faith in this Temple team to show up in the first quarter of this game. They haven't done it yet this season, and you cannot spot a team that is explosive as Memphis is. 14 points, 10 points in the first quarter, like you can't. So I'm one of those football people, like I need to see it to believe it. So if they show me that they are emotionally in check at the start of a game this year, great, I'll take it. But I think Memphis gets ahead a little bit early. Temple has to play catch up. I think it's a good game. I think that you see the progress that you want to see from this team. But I think ultimately, I think Memphis is a better team. So I'm going to pick them 35-31.
So real quick, if that happens, let's say Temple goes out there, they play better, they lose by 4-7, whatever, against a potentially solid Memphis team. How does that make you? Do you feel any different at that point? Are you okay at this point with, okay, well, they're making progress and they look like they can compete against teams like Memphis, or it's still just like, look, all that matters is wins and losses?
For me, the way that I've always framed this season is that like we're still one season away from where I would expect them to be legitimate competitors in this conference. So if they come out and they play well and they show that they belong consistently, I think they'll steal some wins from teams, and I think they might be a little bit better than we expected. But obviously, I also agree with you that this is a fork in the road game. Like you can't get your doors blown off here. Like you cannot. Like that is like we're
that's
going
for next
into,
Friday. Next
right.
Friday, you get the tours blown.
Yeah. So I think they just need to show that they're competitive, that they can keep this game close, that this is, Wagner and Akron. I mean, frankly, like those games don't mean anything to me as an analyst. Like, sure, yeah, you beat them, great. So they need to come in and just kind of show that they can compete.
Let's go to the mailbag. We've got several questions to get to. First one comes here. Again, these are screen names from our subscribers on the message board. So the first one comes from Rockland Al. How do you view the future of the AAC if, as reported, Colorado State and Air Force join? Same question, but with Memphis and possibly SMU being offered membership in the Big 12.
I don't see SMU being offered membership in the Big 12. Memphis for sure. I think Memphis, Boise State, maybe. I don't see. They don't need the Dallas market. They already have the Dallas market.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting conference at that point. I don't know if it's an interesting conference that Temple wants to be in long term, because it's pretty well stretched out. I don't mind the Air Force edition if that happens. Colorado State doesn't do much for me. I'm more curious about what the other remaining two editions are. If it's UAB, like the big rumor right now is that it's going to be Colorado State, Air Force, UAB, and UTSA, which we were just talking about as beating Memphis earlier. So if that's the case, then
we would sincerely have the opportunity to cover Sincere McCormick. You want to kill me? I thought that was going to be followed with like, I'll kill you.
He probably won't be. He probably won't be here. I've never been to San Antonio. I hear good things. There's a river walk and whatnot. I like river walks. Yeah, I'll go there.
I like river walks.
That does more for me than some of these schools being mentioned. I'm not going to Birmingham. It's like I don't care about that. I think it would show you that that the American still values media markets. So I mean, we can get into a long discussion about whether or not media markets still matter at this point, and I think you can make an argument that they don't matter as much because of streaming. But if that's the 4 schools they added, then Mike Oresco is showing you that media markets still matter to him. I think it's not a great geographical fit. I don't know if there was anybody out there that made a better geographical fit for Temple. Like if you added Buffalo and Marshall, that's still 6-7 hours each way for both schools. Like, that's not road trips, right? Unless you're going to add Villanova, Monmouth, and somehow convince Rutgers to come back. There's no way it's all of a sudden going to be a better geographical fit for Temple.
Yeah, Dante, any thoughts on this one?
No, I agree with everything Kyle said. I think that, I mean, the Americans in a tough spot. Like
Kyle just smiled brightly as he works on his second can of soda now.
I did. I was wondering if you were going to notice I switched on the second one.
Then is that a diet A&W?
Yeah. So I go from caffeine, and then I always do like a non-caffeine. It's like a dessert soda. But yeah, they're always diets. I don't try not to waste calories on sodas, so they're always diet.
Excuse me. Dante, please go ahead.
No, I mean, I agree with what Kyle said. Like, I don't really know what other path the American can really take at this point. Like, who are you going to add that's a better geographical fit for Temple? I think Memphis probably will get a Big 12 invite. I mean, basketball, I feel like matters. Like, I'm very much a football person, but like Memphis basketball is very much trending in the right direction. I feel like the Big 12 would be smart to kind of take that. I don't know. football wise, I think Colorado State's a little bit of a better program than given credit for. I think that they could make a little bit of
not with
noise.
their current coaching staff.
No, I know, but like they do win games. Like
Not this year, Dante.
Not this year, I know, but they've got they have to make some changes, but they've won games in the past. I think they have a couple of NFL guys on there. They're not.
Yeah,
I mean,
Adazio's got to stick around long enough so we can have a Steve Adazio press
Oh
conference.
God.
Oh yeah.
Look, if they
Hey, guys, steady the boat. Steady the boat.
They got to convince Trey McBride to come back for 5 more years somehow, so I can see him in person.
I'd love to see that. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
But they've had some good teams in recent years. So I don't know. I'm a little bit higher on them than you guys, and that's fine. It doesn't really matter at the end of the day. Like, who else are they going to add? Frankly,
Right. And then I mean. And you kind of, but if you add Air Force and Colorado State, you kind of got the Denver market because you're getting the north and the south there with Fort Collins and wherever the hell Air Force is. So, like, again, medium markets.
Mm-hmm.
Colorado's not as far away as you think, too. In my mind, it's next to Oregon. Like, it's like with Oregon, it's not that far away compared to some of the Temple's getting on a plane either way. So,
yeah,
easy to fly in Denver.
Next question comes from the screen name Cool Hand Red. How about the play of Manny Walker so far this season? The young man is really making a name for himself. As a force on the defense, I'm glad to see his intensity, passion, and athleticism. Thoughts? Go Owls.
I didn't think he was that bad last year. People get obsessed with sexy stats like sacks, and for a reason, right? Like sacks can be momentum changing things. He had a lot of TFLs last year opposite of Arnold Ebiketie. So I mean, I think he's been a steady performance. Wasn't that his nickname? They were calling him like Steady Manny. Mm-hmm. He was a steady performer last year. This year, he's getting a lot more pressure. He's getting the 2 interceptions. But yeah, it's been good to see him improve. He's a 6-year guy at this point. So this is what you expect. This is why he came back. He didn't think he had enough film. You're getting film now. This doesn't just have to be the Kyle answering show. Like, sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, I would just echo a lot of the same things. I think, the interceptions are great and they're really athletic plays, but like, how, is that going to happen every game? No, that's more like right place, right time type things, bad throws, stuff like that. I think what's more impressive about what Manny's done this year is just how consistently he's been winning off the edge, even though if it's not a sack, it's a pressure, it's getting a quarterback off his spot, stepping up into the pocket, right? Maybe you have an interior guy who's winning and that, you create a sack that way, you create a pressure. So that's been impressive. But I agree with Kyle. I thought he was fine last year and I think he's been good this year. So, I know that was like a big thing for John is like who was going to step up and pass rusher. And it seems like Walker is kind of filling most of that gap, probably not as much as we'd like, but I think he's probably been the most consistent guy and the best guy up front so far.
Yeah. I mean, I think Will Rogers has had a good game against Wagner other than some dumb penalty. I mean, the penalties were earlier in the year, but I think he's gotten a lot of pressures too, but it's the same thing. They just haven't really paid off yet in form of sacks, but that doesn't mean they're not impacting the game.
Yeah. And against that move he made to get the sack against BC was really a really impressive play. And I mean, if he keeps that up, hey, at the time when they brought him in from the portal, again, people are like, well, you lost Quincy Roche. Fans are like, is this what we're getting in return? And I'm not saying that Manny Walker is going to automatically end up in the NFL, but now you're starting to really see, why they reached out to him. And they, if he keeps playing this way, they'll look smart for taking him in the portal.
I'm not saying anything we all know. Walter Stewart's very good at his job.
Yeah.
They have a very good defensive line coach.
Yeah.
Yes. Next question. From the screen name Tiger Al. Thoughts on this article and whether A, Temple should be a net gainer or loser in the transfer portal, B, if it's a different story for basketball versus football. So it's from this athleticdirector.com site, and it talks about the real detailed breakdown of the transfer portal, and it talks a lot about basketball and should Temple be a net gainer in the transfer portal for basketball? Yeah, I mean it's if he's asking us to focus first on basketball, look, I mean, basketball wise, they already struck out on one of their top targets in Daniel Skillings. They didn't even make his final list, and Skillings just committed to Cincinnati. So they wanted to try to get him out of Roman Catholic. They didn't get him. Not to say that things couldn't change, but whether they have one scholarship available or 2 scholarships available, I would think, again, just to remind fans, we can't have a coach on the show and ask them who they're recruiting. They can't comment on guys on the record, but I would take an educated guess and say that they would probably at this point not want to reach for somebody and try to get an impact transfer in the transfer portal. So I'll give Aaron credit. I don't know what the demand was, but look, I mean, when you have a 5-11 COVID shortened season, yeah, maybe somebody could have plucked Damian Dunn off your roster or said, hey, we saw some impressive stuff on tape from Jeremiah Williams. Try to convince him to leave. Maybe, if you were an ACC program that recruited Quincy Adam-McCoy, hey, you're not playing, you can fill his head with thoughts. Oh, you're not developing there, come here and play. He held the roster together. And I think that they'll probably look for a transfer. So they should probably be a net gainer in the transfer portal. I would think it really might seem to be their best option, unless there's somebody, a 22 recruit that we don't know about yet that they really like. But I mean, that would be my immediate reaction to Tiger Owl's question there. But I wanted to see what you thought about Kyle. Dante, if you want to check in.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think they kind of already are, right? Because I mean, who have they lost Monty Scott, who I think we all agree was a little over his head at this level and went down the level. And they added Jake Forster, who, for everything that people like to say online, he's been a productive big in this setup. And they added Caleb Battle, who looks like he has a chance to be pretty good at this level. I think with the holding a scholarship thing, I know that really wasn't the question. The holding a scholarship, I think it's just easier to recruit off of they think they're going to be better this year than they were last year. They need to be better this year than they were last year.
Or not, it's
a
problem.
Yeah, it's another fork in the road season. Like, you need to show steady improvement here. So if you go 18-14, it's easier to recruit off of that than a 5-11 season. So I think they're kind of smart for it. Would they have taken Daniel Skillings? Yeah. But I think it's now that hasn't happened, keep that in your pocket, see what's available there in March.
Yeah, and we'll see what Emmanuel Okpomo can do for them too.
Yeah, they haven't talked about
out of Wake, and see
Sage Tolbert. Like I think they've already kind of been a net positive via the transfer portal.
Yeah. Next question here, more conference realignment stuff. Kyle mentioned UAB before. Berkshire Al, the question here: any thoughts on UAB joining the AAC? I live in Huntsville, Alabama, about an hour away. All of their programs are doing well. I think Mark Ingram, a former associate athletic director at Temple, will add, has done an amazing job in a state where it's all about Bama and Auburn. UAB is coming in a close third in sports coverage. Yeah, I'd like to see UAB join the American. It's not going to do anything for the casual Philadelphia fan that's just obsessed with, what the hell's going on with the Eagles and Ben Simmons and all that stuff. But yeah, Mark Ingram's done a terrific job down there. UAB has been good. I think they make a lot of sense. Again, it's not a program name where people are going to be like, ooh, UAB, that's a great ad. But yeah, makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and it'd be the best mascot in the conference.
You stole my cop out. That was going to be mine. I was like, I just want to see the dragon.
Yeah, you get dragon. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense. I think it would help football wise. If you're a pessimist, you go, well, you added ECU because ECU was riding the high in the early 2010s, and look what that did.
Yeah, none of this is great for basketball. But
no, and none of it's great for Temple geographically. Right. But in general, if nothing was going to be a geographical fit, then UAB is solid in basketball. They're not terrible. It's not like Air Force is going to be very bad for basketball.
Yes.
There's a reason Navy is a football only participant. So
unless David Robinson has kids that we don't know about who are.
And the whole thing with Dave Robinson was he wasn't that big when he went to Navy, right?
No.
He was only 6'4", because there's a limit to join the Naval Academy. You can only be 6'5" and under, and then he got big.
What was that again?
It's growth plates.
A couple more here. Double checking the board here. We call this guy screen name Al to the 8th degree. What is the feeling around the basketball program at the university right now? Apathy, dread, or are people genuinely excited for the future that Coach McKee is creating and selling? Or on campus, is McKee not selling anything at all? Dante, you're a student here. We'll flip this over to you. Do you, as a Temple student, do you feel like people are excited for the season? Is that a weird question to answer coming off of a COVID season where nobody could go to games? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, so I don't cover the basketball team really at all. I pretty much stick to football. So I don't know, I don't know if there's a ton of excitement from the student body. I don't know if people are thinking about basketball right now, frankly, at least from the student body. When my friends text me about Temple sports, it's still football, usually to, they ask who the heck is Temple even playing this week is usually the question that I get from my friends who don't go to Temple. But from the people who do, I don't know. I think right now they're still in football mode. If I had to guess, the team they're 2-2 at the end of the day. And I think that they're still captivating the student body. I do think it is cool. It's Aaron McKee is like great for the student body because like you say that name and everybody immediately just goes Allen Iverson, right? Like the generic fan has kind of been my experience, right? Like when I tell people that because I did cover the team 2 years ago pretty heavily. And, it's like, oh, like I got to interview Aaron McKee. I'd be like, oh, do you ask him a question about like Allen Iverson? Like that gets people excited that Aaron McKee's the head coach. So I think when we get closer to basketball, that'll be an easier question to answer. But like right now, I think it's still football, at least on the student side.
Mm-hmm. We got one more question to get
real
to
quick.
here.
It's not cold yet. It's not cold enough yet. I don't think about basketball yet until it's like fully fall. A little chilly today, but still 67.
Not going to be able to get to every single mailbag question today. I apologize for that. We'll get to one more here, and then a little surprise for you guys that we'll throw in here before we close out the show. Let's get to this one from D-Blaze75. Question for the Scoop. The offense, I guess you meant to say the offensive line has been underperforming all year. Why not play the younger players more? We saw some playing time for Wisdom Quarshie. Do you think we'll see more younger offensive linemen play as the year goes on? I mean, my thought would be, depends on the course of the game, depends on injuries. That they're very high on Jim Tuobedegwu. He got in later in the game in a blowout against Wagner. They like him a lot. They like Bryce Tolman. I think Wiz held his own, when he subbed in for Joe Hooper. I don't know if this is just an overly simplistic answer. I mean, I guess it depends on the course of the season. If they really start getting beaten up here and they see that they're not going to be playing for bowl eligibility and Rod Carey says, look, we got to really continue to build for the future. Yeah, maybe you see more Bryce Tolman depending on what they're seeing on film. I don't know. That's the short answer there, but what do you guys think of this one?
I would say that offensive line is difficult because the coaches, a lot of times they'll talk in generalities and they'll say, well, we really like this player. But you have to be a certain level of strong and you have to have your body exactly correct. So like, I know that the offensive line maybe has been disappointing to some, and I understand that. I don't think that they've been great, or I don't really think that they've met expectation, at least relative to the experience that they have. But with that said, like offensive line, there is a steep drop off. Like you can do a lot worse than what Temple's doing right now. And if those young players were really, really ready to play, I think we would see them. Now, we saw Wiz last year, so he's a little bit different than some of the other guys that John mentioned. So the coaches can be high on Toman and Jim too, and that's good. And you know what? They're going to have to play next year. A bunch of these guys are going to be out on the line, so we're going to have to see some of them next season. But offensive line is very tricky. You cannot put a player out there who physically isn't ready. And I don't know what the physical readiness of some of those younger guys are. Obviously, I don't know if there's any way, unless we like outwardly ask. And honestly, I don't think they'll give us that answer anyway. So it's tough, man. Offensive line's hard because you'd almost prefer someone who's like going to be average over someone who might be really good, even though that they're young, but they're going to have like really bad games, or they just can't handle power at all. So now you're matchup dependent. So it's tough. I think, obviously if they're terrible and they just want to, rotate guys in at the end of the year to see what they got, that's a different conversation. But right now, I think they'd be wise to kind of stick with the guys that are ready and try and, coach them up and get them to play, more to their potential.
I completely agree with all that. Deion Dawkinses and Kyle Friends are rare. Like there's a reason these kids, even Bryce Tolman, who's a second-year freshman, like it's better to wake your time with these kids. I think you've seen when there's the possibility for a guy to be strong enough to earn those snaps, you see it with Wiz. Like Joseph Hooper was struggling, especially in run blocking. Or I think Hooper might actually be a little more with pass blocking, but he was struggling. They're giving an opportunity where they're kind of splitting those snaps. So I completely agree. They've been underperforming a bit, but they're still all things considered a pretty solid offensive line at this point.
All right. So before we close things out, had a chance. Some of you might know that Temple is inducting its next class into its Athletics Hall of Fame. Among that group is Bill Bradshaw, who's tied to this person I'm going to talk about now, who is, of course, Al Golden. Again, if you know anything about the Temple football program, you know that Al was really the guy who kickstarted the revival of this whole thing. Matt Rule was an assistant on his staff, and Foley was an assistant on his staff, and really turned things around, really got things done at the ground level. I had a chance to talk to Al Golden today. We're going to play a snippet of this interview here. The whole thing will be made available for our alscoop.com subscribers. We'll play a little snippet of this interview here. Again, Al is going to be inducted into Temple's Athletics Hall of Fame. The Bengals are playing, I believe, Thursday night. So tomorrow night, as we're recording this on a Wednesday, the 2-1 Cincinnati Bengals. And Al's the linebackers coach there. Has been with the Lions after moving on from Temple. He was at Miami. Things didn't, exactly work out from there. I think he had some difficult circumstances from the get-go. But again, a guy who really completely turned around the program, got them to their first bowl game in 30 years, and did a lot of great things at Temple. So here's a snippet of our conversation. And again, the full interview will be available for our subscribers. But here's a little bit of what you're going to hear from that conversation. Al, I mean, we've talked, a lot of this is you and I kind of going down memory lane on this. And I know I've asked you a lot of this stuff before, but for new listeners, if you take a look back, obviously this was arguably the biggest overhaul in college football at the time. And you were one of the best young defensive coordinators in the country at the time at Virginia. What made you, if you were sitting and talking to your wife, Kelly, if you're sitting around talking to her and planning out your next move, what attracted you to Temple? What made you think, you know what, this is going to be a heck of a rebuild, but I think I can do it? What made you think, like, this is possible at Temple?
Well, I just believed, number one, it's home for me, right? So, and then number two, I was recruiting that corridor. So I had recruited, from basically New York City, down to Richmond. And so that was the corridor that I was recruiting. And, I said to myself when the job came open, and ultimately when Mr. Bradshaw interviewed me, I said, I know we can get 16 guys. All you need is 16 guys a year, 17 guys a year. That can help us win. That can change, the direction of this program. And obviously, I believe strongly in my set of core values, what the standards were going to be, in my ability to lead. So I guess my wife probably thought I was nuts at first, but it just felt right. It felt like I was the right candidate at the right time, and truly blessed and grateful, to Bill Bradshaw and the administration for selecting me, because it was really just one of those moments that I'm really proud of, and really proud to be a part of.
All right, so great to catch up with Al. It was a fun guy to cover when he was at Temple. Again, being inducted into Temple's Athletics Hall of Fame. You'll be able to, like I said, if you're an alscoop.com subscriber, hear that full interview on the site. If you haven't subscribed yet, great time to do it now. That'll do it for this week. Big thanks to Kyle for being back with us this week, and Dante.
Big thanks. I clicked the link.
All right, fine.
Here I am, guys. I made the commute.
I won't thank you next week. Thanks, Dante, for hopping on, and hopefully Sam will be back with us next week. So we'll be back next week after the Memphis game to wrap up conversation about that. And then, of course, there's a big game coming up. Tall task for the Owls playing Cincinnati. So we'll talk to you soon.